No one knows what you're supposed to say. So just own it. They don't know if you messed up. We sometimes fool ourselves into thinking we have to have all the answers, and you really don't have to have all the answers.
Welcome to Key Connections for Educators. I'm Nate Key.
And I'm Hannah Connect.
I got my start in corporate training,
And I started out as a classroom teacher.
but the conversations between us, they've made us better educators.
And now we're inviting you into those conversations because learning out loud together changes everything.
So whether you teach students or you train professionals, we believe these conversations can connect us all. Welcome back to Key Connections for Educators. This is a show where we explore the messy, the meaningful, and sometimes even the magical moments that shape how we teach and how we learn and how we grow. Today, we're going to be diving headfirst into a topic that I think every educator, facilitator, or really even every human being has wrestled with at some point: confidence and competence. Candidly, those words sound a lot shinier than they feel when you're standing in front of a room of people and your hands are sweating and your voice is trembling and you're wondering whether they're going to find out that you don't actually have it all figured out. So today's episode is for anyone who's ever clung to a script like a lifeline, or if you've ever whispered, just fake it till you make it under their breath while trying to lead a training session. And also to anyone who's begun to realize that maybe the best educators aren't the ones who know it all, but the ones who know how to ask the right questions. So joining us today is our friend and fellow educator, Rachel Desrosiers. She's going to help us unpack what it really means to build confidence, not just as a performance, but as a practice. Rachel, we are so glad to have you join us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Nate, Hannah. I'm so glad to be here to be able to share my experience with you and with the audience.
We have really been looking forward to this discussion with you, Rachel. We're going to be talking about topics that a lot of us can relate to: overcoming fears, embracing uncertainty, and fostering interactive learning experiences. Let's go ahead and start with how you became an educator, how you became a trainer, Rachel. And we'd love to hear a little bit more about your origin story. How did you become an educator? And also, what's your why? Why have you stuck with it?
So I became an educator by accident, honestly. I didn't plan on it. I know some people know early in their lives, like, I want to be a teacher, I want to do this, I want to do that. I had no idea of what I wanted to do in life. No idea. I went to college with a mechanical engineering major just because my father had that degree. And when I looked at the coursework for the 4 years, I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And I was undecided for maybe my first year and a half. But I found that I really liked psychology and I really liked economics, both of which focus on humans and how they make decisions. And so as I was learning about people and just how we work, I realized that I really did enjoy
So,
the people side of learning rather than just the math and the science, which I liked as well. But there was something about the people side. And as I was going through schoolwork and classes and things like that, I found myself teaching a lot of the times without being an educator per se. So if I had a study group, a lot of the times we would read through materials together and we would do teach backs without me understanding that's what a teach back was. So we would quiz each other and we would present to each other and say, well, no, actually, this is how this works. And we would just work together to learn the information. And as I was doing that, it was helping me to learn, but I also was getting a little bit of enjoyment of, hey, I can help my friend understand this information, or I get it and now she gets it, or we didn't understand it and we worked together and now he gets it and I get it. We all get it. There was just this feeling of accomplishment when we could help each other to learn. In addition to that, randomly, my friends, my family would come to me and ask me questions about budgeting. I'm not in any way a budget master, a financial master, but I had information that they didn't have. And so I would take that information and teach it to them. And I was able then to realize, well, if I understand this, I can teach it to somebody else. So it allowed for me to practice in a way and learn more about education without being on the educator track. And as I was doing that, I started to realize I kind of like this. I like being able to sit down with someone who doesn't understand and navigate them through something. And then at the end, there's that light bulb moment. There's that aha moment where they're like, I get it. There's something really rewarding about that. And as I continued through college, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do with my degrees, but I had two of them now. And I happened to go to a career fair where Lincoln Financial Group was there, and it was the only empty booth. So I just walked up to it. Might have been fate, who knows? I interviewed for their leadership preparation program. And it happened to be that the first role I interviewed for that I did get, they removed. But then they had a backup role that they said, actually, we need someone here. It's a training position in HR. Do you want it? And I was very nervous because I'm not a trainer. As far as I was concerned, how am I going to train people and teach people? But I was willing to try it. I was willing to go in and learn about it. Even though I didn't know anything about insurance, I'm like, I can do this. I can be a trainer. I like to learn and I like to help people learn. And so that's how I became an educator. And really, what made me stick with it was those little moments of aha, like realizing like I'm helping someone get it.
Can you take us back to your first experiences with public speaking, and what was that like for you?
It's probably around the same time that most of us have had to speak in public or present, and that would be high school. We had those group presentations where you had to stand in front of the class and go through your presentation. Nerve wracking. My first experience, I would say alone though, was college. Because in high school, you have a partner, it's your peers, people. But in college was my very first time where it was just me in front of a group of individuals that I did not know my freshman year in speech class. It was terrifying. Being the only person up there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, with everyone eyes focused on you, listening to every word you're saying. I was anxious. I was sweating, shaking. Not my favorite thing to do. I will say that based off that experience, I thought I would never be any type of trainer or person that would be in front of people in that way. And somehow, like you said, I ended up here. But there was, I remember that fear of, man, everyone's looking at me. I have to get this right. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I embarrass myself? They're judging me. I have to make sure I follow the script that I have. And of course, the professor was trying to teach us to relax and have bullet points and just speak from what you remember. No, I had to have it exactly right and memorize every word, every sentence, every cadence. I had to stand there properly, make sure I didn't show any fear. It was nerve wracking.
I can definitely relate. I understand those feelings. So you eventually did get comfortable with public speaking. What experiences helped you turn that fear into confidence?
Well, let me start by saying I don't know that I ever got fully comfortable. I still freak out a little bit right before I have to present or train or teach anything, but I definitely gained confidence. And it was just through trial and error. It was through forced experiences, through different activities. For example, I had to present a lot more in college. And during college, I also started a job where I was going to people's homes selling knives. I'm sure you've heard about it, Cutco, cutlery. I was doing presentations in person, meeting strangers, going through a whole booklet and saying, hey, get these knives. I had to have confidence while I was doing it because why would you want to buy knives if I'm not confident about the knives, right? So there were a lot more on the job experiences that forced me to be confident speaking to people on a one on one basis. And then throughout my years in college, I progressed through the Cutco industry. I became an account manager where I was interviewing people. So I was running interviews, one on ones, group sessions where I was presenting the job opportunity. I was the decision maker on who was getting hired. And then I also progressed to become a branch manager where I was running full on trainings. So I went from one on one conversations that maybe lasted an hour or so to doing 3 day long trainings for new hires who had to learn directly from me. And again, I had to be confident. I had to be the one that knew what I was saying and could give them the information that they needed So I assumed a lot of leadership positions that helped me to improve just my speaking ability and forced me to be more confident. One of the best pieces of advice that I received when it came to public speaking during that time was no one knows what you're supposed to say. So just own it. They don't know if you messed up. Once I locked in on that and I was like, oh, they really don't know the script. They don't know what I'm supposed to be saying. I relaxed a lot more. And if I did mess up, I gave myself a pass. No, they don't really know. I'll just continue. If I stuttered a little bit, it was, it's okay. Continue. So I gave myself a little bit more grace during that time once I realized that no one really knew what was supposed to be said.
That's helped me too. What I'm hearing you say is it's the repetition, doing it over and over time built that confidence because you just kept putting yourself in those uncomfortable situation and working your way through it.
Exactly.
Yeah, coming from more of a structured teaching background for me, I remember my early days in high school. I was teaching a Sunday school class for younger children. And that repetition of just every Sunday, I was going to be in front of these children and this is what we were going to be doing. I too gained that confidence, but it takes time and the repetition and the consistency over the long term.
Yeah. When you were talking about the Cutco progression that you had, it just brought to mind that you're being moved up because you probably were successful. And so when you have had those wins behind you and you feel confident in your abilities as a salesperson, for example, it translates into the confidence that you might have to tell other people because you've got the badge of honor to pop up there to say, I've done this, I've carried the bag, I know exactly what I'm doing, and here's how you can do it too. And that's really a powerful thing for a lot of us, especially those of us that were accidental trainers that just kind of came into it, right? We usually ended up being in an area of expertise and then, hey, we
Mhm.
could teach other people. But sometimes when I was new, it wasn't necessarily the things I knew that I was worried about. It was like, "Oh, no, what if they ask me a question and I don't know the answer?" And that terror of, like, unexpected questions
Mhm.
was frightening. I remember a time when I was, teaching a class on a product I thought I knew pretty well, and somebody threw out a question that I was not expecting at all, and I was a deer in the headlights, frozen, solid. My confidence was just all out the window. And so there is, like, that moment where we feel really confident until that big snowball hits us. And what's the difference for you between delivering content and then not getting caught up in those moments and really just being able to truly engage with the learners? How did you learn to get off the script, so to speak,
Mhm.
and not worry so much about the right things and really just facilitate that experience?
When I think about it, a lot of times it's easier to be the subject matter expert that has all the answers. And that was my initial experience. There was a script, there was a very specific thing you needed to teach. As long as you got that information across, you were good. If you did get a random question you didn't know the answer to, it was like, oh, I don't know what to do here. And it took some time for me to be okay saying, I don't really know, or let me find out, right? Being the subject matter expert, we sometimes fool ourselves into thinking we have to have all the answers, and you really don't have to have all the answers. You can find out later and come back. So there was a time where I was conducting trainings, but on a more relaxed, non presentation feel. So I do remember my first official training position being at Lincoln Financial Group as a trainer in HR. My role was to develop a training program and then to actually launch that program and manage it within our internal HR department. So when I was doing these trainings, it wasn't me standing up, "Oh, I'm the trainer, you need to listen to me," or "Oh, I'm the decision maker." It was, "All right, we have to figure this stuff out. Let's like we're learning it together. I don't really know it. You know it better than me, but I'm supposed to be training you. So, let's go through it together." It was a more relaxed environment where I was able to become more conversational. I did still need to teach very specific things to those that were taking the training. Some knew more than me, some were very new. They might have been temps or new hires, and I was teaching them from scratch. And Some were just catching up or learning better ways to do things, different processes or workflows. So I had to adapt my training based on who I was actually training, which meant I couldn't just follow a strict script. I had to be able to be flexible. I had to be able to be conversational. And so that's where I started to realize, okay, yes, the content is important, but I have to really be focused on the learner and where they are, what they need, and adjust that way. Throughout my training history since then, I became more focused on being focused on the learner. What does the
And
learner need? Rather than what am I going to give the learner? What do I need to say? How am I going to look? It was, okay, what does the learner need so that this training is successful and they can implement what they need to implement after?
when I hear you say that, that fear that we have for the unknown is maybe about us. And so when you're saying, like, I'm really focused on the learners, when I say I don't know, or if I don't know, and if it's focused on me, there's that fear again. I'm going to get found out that I'm a fraud, right? That I don't know what I'm talking about. But once you can actually make that shift onto your learners, it's not quite as much danger if you don't know something. I don't know if you've had any experiences with that yourself.
A ton. A ton. So, the what comes to mind the most is after I was at Lincoln Financial Group as a trainer, I transitioned into the broker world where I wasn't officially a trainer. I did implementation where I would have to go to companies and present their benefits to them, but I was not a subject matter expert initially. So as I was learning, I still had to go and present to people so that they would understand how their medical, dental, vision, all of their health and wellness benefits worked. That's stressful. People need to make a decision to pick the right plan, right? And there would be times where I would get these very one off questions, very specific to their life of, well, this is what's going on. Which plan should I choose? Or what's better? Or what would happen if I went to this doctor? And I would have to tell them, I don't know, because I
Mm.
could not steer them in the wrong direction. What was great about that experience is I went to so many different companies with so many different plans that I couldn't lock in onto a specific script. I had to just be able to go and whatever information was there, be able to explain it in a way that the audience would understand. And when I got those questions, I got very comfortable saying, I don't know, but I'll find out for you. And then I would find out for them and get them that information back quickly. And as I was getting that information back, I learned something as well. So it gave me the freedom to not be the know it all, end all person, but to be able to say, I'll get that for you. We'll learn it together.
That's really empowering, I think, for you and for the learner because they just want to know that their question's going to be answered and you want to know that they're going to get the right answer as well. And so being able to buy yourself a little bit of time like that with, I don't know, but I'll find out. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think anyone expects anyone to know everything there is to know about everything. And to be able to confidently say that, I think
Hmm.
is the key is knowing that you have the confidence in yourself for the majority of the things you need to cover, but also having the confidence of knowing how to find those extra answers when you need to and getting the time you need to do it and is very freeing. I don't know, Hannah, how you feel about that, but I know I've had experiences like that. I'm sure that you have as well.
What you shared, Rachel, resonates so much with me and my early days when I joined the insurance industry because I didn't know. And yet I was brought on to be a trainer who needed to learn all of this information. And I remember having a conversation with my boss at the time, and she said, and I still have it on my desk, a sticky note that says, I don't know, but let me get back with you about that. Let me go find the answer because that ended up being like my safe response when I was asked, I don't know. And I had to train my very first class only about 6 to 7 months after I was hired. And in that first time I was really training the program, I remember talking with my students and being like, I'm learning this right alongside of you. And being very candid that even though I was the facilitator, I had planned and prepared all this content, that really I was working through the material with them. And we were on this learning journey together. And so for them to see me as both a student and the facilitator of learning, it brought some collaborative learning to that online space. And I was able to see not only was my confidence growing, but the trainees' confidence was growing right along with me, especially that first time I trained.
I just want to throw this out here that what I'm hearing is not a pass for all of us to not know things. Because I think that might also be a temptation for folks to go the opposite direction and say, well, I don't need to know anything then. But no, it's that you're a student with them and really you do want to actually learn together. And that's the key there. Is not to say like, "Oh, well, I don't need to know anything then." No, you do. You need to show up and be able to answer questions because that doesn't build much confidence if you got somebody that just asks questions and never has any answers either. I'm hearing the passion that both of you have and that I share for not just knowing things, but also learning new things together with the audience. And I think that's that collaborative process that we're talking about where we can grow and find this new normal.
What we're speaking to is the difference between being a subject matter expert and transitioning out of that where you do have a base knowledge. You have an understanding and you can guide others through learning, and you may be learning on the way as well, but you don't have to have every single answer. You're going to have the base information for whatever training or presentation you need to give, but at the same point, if there's something you may not know, that's okay.
Rachel, you mentioned the importance of creating a space where learners feel safe to ask questions. And we, as trainers and educators, one of our major roles is creating that space where learners feel safe to take risks and, with that, ask questions. So, how do you do that in your training sessions?
In my most recent role as a senior training consultant for change management, I was having conversations with leaders in the industry who may or may not have been on board with change initiatives that were happening in the industry. So I had to create an environment where I could teach them change management methodologies and strategies to navigate their team through, but I could also give them that space to say, I don't really like this. I don't agree. And we could have the conversation about that being a true human reaction. No one really likes change. No one wants to do it. Sometimes we have a very significant emotional response to it and we still have to change. Let's talk about it. So, in that role, rather than it just being, hey, this is change management, you have to do it, it was, hey, this is what's going on. Let's talk about it. How do we work through it? And change management is truly focused on the people side of change. So, me just learning about that helped me to understand how people respond and how you can help people to get on board and kind of work through the change curve, how you can build that buy in. And a lot of that is through communication. It's through giving that information and then giving the opportunity for people to respond and share, having discussions. So, just that topic alone shifted my mindset. And then when I was dealing with people leaders and adult learners, I was able to change my trainings from being me giving information to us having a discussion. So, just because of business need, I couldn't just be a trainer. I had to
Mm.
become a facilitator. And in being a facilitator specifically for that topic, I had to create a space where people would be comfortable engaging in conversation and having discussions that they otherwise probably would not have wanted to have with anyone, let alone me. So rather than me being the trainer Rachel, which could be scary, right? I became Rachel, the trainer. So it was me being a person first that was helping them to navigate through these things and having conversation while still guiding them in the proper form for change management. And then it just happened to be I'm also a trainer, right?
And so, by creating that space, you were talking with your trainees about change and how that impacted them, there were some vulnerabilities that came up. And so, by you building trust, you created the space for people to be vulnerable, to share how change was impacting them. And then they could better respond and be receptive to
Mhm.
how that change would apply to them and how they could adapt to make that happen in their work world.
Exactly. Due to my environment or my circumstances at that time, I did have to adjust my approach. I was fully remote. every single person that I was training, speaking to, consulting was in a different location and was online, similar to how we are right now. So, as an educator, I had to find a way to make a 1 hour training or a workshop that was 6 hours engaging, where people would be involved, contributing to the conversation, collaborating. And I found, of course, outside of this position that adult learners don't really want you to just speak to them for an hour, just talk at them for an hour. They'd rather have a conversation. So just in my day-to-day life, I took those experiences and I tried to figure out how can I make this training, how can I make this workshop more of a conversation where multiple people are contributing. It's not just about me teaching them. We're all learning from each other. Little did I know this is adult this is adult learning theory. Like I didn't know that. I was just doing it through experience, but this is adult learning theory when you really allow for adults to take ownership of their learning and be more engaged in how they learn.
I've got this really great friend of mine named Matt Warnke who says that the role of a facilitator is helping someone else along the path of self-discovery. I love that quote, and I share that because that's really what we're doing, right? And we can engage with somebody, and I think that it was difficult for me personally to make that shift mentally when I was early in my career. I fortunately had a couple of really strong facilitators that came alongside me during my first formal training role and said, "Hey, stop talking and ask some questions because people are falling asleep." But it took so much of the pressure off of me. I didn't have to fill an hour anymore. It doesn't mean you don't have to do the work. It means that you don't necessarily have to do the talking. And I think that was such a breath of fresh air to say that just because I'm doing a training doesn't mean I have to talk. Sometimes it's just asking the right questions. So I think that is really vulnerable sometimes because when we're not doing the talking, we don't have control over the class. It might go somewhere else that we don't want it to go. Someone might argue with us, or they might, in the process of having their brain move from here to over here, they just have some barriers that they have to get through. And I think for me, one of the hardest things to remember was to put myself back into the place of not understanding those concepts at the first point, and to remember that everybody needs to go through that same process of, it's almost like the grief process, right? Of bargaining and denial and all, the whole thing to change your brain to something else. And I can't just say like, okay, well, I'm going to ask one question and everybody's light bulb's going to go off and we're going to have fun. It's that change management. I have to remember that even the process of learning change management is change management, and I have to let them go through that. And sometimes that's a little chaotic and that's really hard, but it's
Mhm.
also more honest.
Yes.
And that takes a lot of courage, Rachel. And so I just wanted to say, to get from the place where you are in a college class, really worried about whether or not you're saying the right words, to the place where you're now able to ask questions to people courageously, knowing that there may be some chaos, that's huge. And it's just so beautiful. And I just love it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
completely different. Completely different.
Well, I like what Nate was saying. This is really a messy topic. And for a lot of us as educators, we want to hold on to the reins. We want that control
Mhm.
because we feel responsible for the learning to be happening in that. But it's in leaning into releasing some of that control, giving it back to our students in a structured environment, right? There are routines and structures in place to keep us moving forward in the right direction. But letting go of some of that control is often the very thing that's going to help our students actually engage more and feel like, oh, I have permission to speak to this or talk about this. And it becomes more easy for them to apply and internalize rather than just sitting back and being a passive listener.
That's the key word, control. When you relinquish a little bit of your control, it's unsettling, but it makes for a better learning environment. These are adults a lot of the time, and if you're even at with children as well, and you can't really, like, grab a child and, like, "You must do it this way," or "It has to be this way," or "Be in this box." It's very difficult for people to learn that way. So when you give more freedom, they actually give you more attention. They pay
They
more
do.
attention, and it allows for a better learning environment. I can remember back in the day, quote unquote, right? Back in the day when breakout rooms were like, oh, we don't want to do a breakout room because what if they speak about something we don't want to speak about in the breakout room? I embraced it. I was like, hey, we're gonna go in breakout rooms, you're gonna go speak about this. And I just was hoping that when they came back and we did a recap or a debrief, I could address anything there. And it was all about, hey, you have the freedom to discuss it. We're working through it. But yes, if I need to bring us back on the right track, I can do that. Right. And that's where also that confidence came in. I don't have to have control 100% of the time. I'm facilitating, which means I'm keeping them in a nice little round, soft bubble rather than a hard box. But I'm kind of like, oh, well, wait, let's get back in here. But I'm still allowing for that freedom for them to work through it.
I love the analogy. And I was going to say that applies to the K-12 classroom too. Once you've established that structure and your norms, then staying within that loose bubble, those students thrive when they are given more of the autonomy or permission to speak or to participate in a discussion or in a project rather than just being talked out. It eliminates the intimidation factor of, oh, this is the teacher, the authority, and I'm the student. It helps the dynamic a lot more. And again, it builds trust between the student and the teacher, and even the teacher with the students when she or he watches the fact that the students actually thrive or they get a lot out of you as the facilitator or teacher relinquishing control. All right. Well, as we wrap up, if you could go back in time to your early days, your college days, where you were so nervous about getting up in front of people for the first time and speaking, what advice would you give to yourself?
Ooh, what would I say to myself? I probably would say relax, first of all, because I was so stressed wanting to get it right. And I think I would just say, it's okay. Embrace the unknown. If you don't know, that's all right. You're learning. Just be yourself, be genuine. You're going to be able to get them the information they need. Everything's okay. It's just allowing myself to relax a little bit would have helped back then rather than focusing on being perfect and getting it right. Of course, there's development that's happening and it did come with time, but that relaxing piece and just embracing the unknown, that's the advice I would give to myself.
Yeah. It's that being real and allowing yourself and the learners that are with you to have the pressure off. And I think that authenticity of being able to just show up as you, as opposed to having to show up perfect, is so hard, especially because we live in a culture where like Instagram and Facebook, everything's so curated and the video, you can edit all the filler words out, and those aren't able to be cut out in a live experience. But to just be able to be genuine and authentic just takes the pressure off of everybody in the room. And that creates a really great learning experience.
Creating a space where people want to engage, the connections that we're making, the being real, that's what's going to motivate our students to want to be there and then want to engage themselves. And I would add, have fun. Like thinking back to my early teaching days, yes, I was nervous, but when I was having fun with my students and facilitating an activity or a game, even with adult learners, when I'm in the flow of that fun, all my nerves disappear because I'm in the present with my learners and we're doing something fun and memorable together too. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your experience. Have you made the shift from scripted training to facilitation? And what challenges have you faced? What strategies have helped you engage your learners? If there was something that we talked about today in our conversation that resonated with you, drop it in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And Rachel, thank you for sharing your experiences with us today and for your insight on this really relevant topic that so many learning and development folks can relate to. And as always, like and subscribe and tune in next time.